Hey, since you brought up, I totally, well, it just escaped my mind when we were talking about this, but that demo version of While My Guitar Gently Weeps is absolutely golden too. That's something else you got to learn.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
we'll talk about it a little bit later, but you're right. It's in a different key, and uh, and the same thing happened with Something. By the time they recorded it, they changed the key and took it up higher from the key you're about to play it in. And
okay,
that was that was mostly so that I'm guessing, so I don't know this for sure, but it was to make the vocals like more powerful, to have him be singing higher. And the same thing with While My Guitar Gently Weeps. By putting it in A minor on with the on the keyboard and the guitar, it
right,
made it much heavier and driving than the way he envisioned it. So both these songs are really interesting because they had their genesis, so to speak, when George was just messing around, came from him screwing around with the acoustic guitar, maybe capoing here or there, or trying different things, and really assembling the whole song in his head in a different key than they settled on. But they went through a lot of almost generations before they came to what we heard on the White Album and Abbey Road in particular. So it is
yeah.
pretty cool.
So, well, I mean, I didn't look at any of the detail on this whatsoever. I simply pulled
Good.
it up on YouTube, and it's just the album cover you're staring at.
Right.
Um,
Okay. Perfect.
and
Yeah.
yeah, which is what I wanted. But and from that, I started gleaning. But how in years, how long would it have been between that version and the White Album or the Abbey Road album?
Very short, like less than two. In the case of While My Guitar Gently Weeps, probably 6 months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. In the case of Something, probably a year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but
Okay.
so yeah, these are not things like "I'll Follow the Sun." Was I think was already 4 or 5 years old by the time they recorded it on their third or fourth album. I think it was one of their really early songs. And then on their first album in particular, they did a lot of covers. I mean that's what they were doing in Germany when they were always going over to Hamburg and playing stuff. And so they had their Chuck Berry tunes and Carl Perkins songs and stuff like that. And then on the second album, they started putting more of their songs on there. And by the third, like by A Hard Day's Night, they were. So they had a lot of songs kind of in the back catalog.
Yeah.
And but again, so I think like I'll Follow the Sun was one that did sit around for a couple of years um, before it got to a record. But I think in the case of those two Harrison tunes, they were. Uh, oh, the other thing. In 1968, they decided to start their own record label, and Apple became the
Right.
label, right? And I think the White Album was their first album on Apple, but they wanted to. They also wanted to bring in other artists and have all kinds of other artists on the label. And so I may have already told you the story. You might already know it, so I'll make it short first. But and really, the first artist they signed was James Taylor, and so he flew over to England and was working on what really amounted to being his first album. And I don't know if you've ever seen the album cover. It's got him in a kind of a paisley suit. It folds open, and yeah, he's kind of like laying back in this kind of psychedelic suit, right? And there were a couple songs of his from that album that didn't go anywhere at the time, but became big hits for him later. And one of them, like Carolina in My Mind.
Yeah.
Okay, that was one he recorded then, and then eventually re-recorded when he got a contract with Warner Brothers on a later album. No, it wasn't until he made a greatest hits album that he had to re-record it because they couldn't get the rights from Apple to put that on. And then he had this song of his, "Something in the Way She Moves." Do you remember that song of James
Oh,
Taylor's?
sure. Sure.
Okay, so
Sure.
I mean, it had a really cool guitar part, right? Something like. Something in the way she moves.
Yeah.
Looks my way or calls my name. Anyway, that one, and that grabbed George's attention, and he asked James if he could use that line, "Something in the way she moves," and write his own song with it. So this whole thing was inspired. This whole song, "Something," was borrowed and inspired and approved of by James Taylor. Who's James to say at the time? Who is this 20-year-old kid that's going to tell George Harrison, "No, you can't use my line in your own song"? And so, because yeah, a lot of times that question comes up. It's like, hey, those songs have like the same words in them. Did James Taylor steal that from George? I said, nope. George got permission to use that line from James.
Huh. Oh my God. That's a
Yeah,
great story. That's
yeah,
a great story.
yeah. Okay, so what do you got? What do you have figured out past the D chord?
Well, I believe that it's something new.
Oh,
Oh, where am I?
okay. You know what? Hang on a second. So D is not the chord that the verse starts on. The D chord you're hearing is the beginning of strum that chord once, just a D chord.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just strum it. Let me hear it. Where we hear the D in there is the very first thing we hear. Da 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 dum. That's the D chord. It's the first chord of that little theme. So to hear the melody note, yes. Okay, now strum that chord one more time. Put the whole chord back on. Of that melody I just sang, where is that first note? Da da da. It's one of the notes in the chord.
It's no, it's here. It's
Yeah,
F sharp.
it's F sharp. Okay, and what's the next note then?
A.
Good. Play the whole. See if you can find like the whole little 5 or 6 note phrase. That's it. Okay, so that's the little melodic theme and intro, and that F sharp is played. That whole melody can be played an octave higher with that D chord on. So like put the D chord back on, so you've got an F sharp on the first string.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
find the melody right there now,
Okay. Um,
with or without the chord on. Like you could let go of the chord
oh.
and the notes for a minute.
Okay. So.
That's it, right? I mean, you can hear that that's clearly the melody that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
When it gets there, it's not a D chord anymore. What note is that you're playing?
Um. A.
So we need a note that has A in it right at this spot that is going to be the starting point of the vocal.
Right. Well, one choice would be the five and the D chord.
Yeah, yeah. And now if you were yeah, um, so that's what happens. The song starts on A. The vocal starts on A.
Okay.
Now, if you think, let's get back to that intro.
Okay.
Where else do you think you might need chords in there? Which of those notes can it all be a D chord? In other words, the way I would play this, what we really need to do is we need to reach up to this A without letting go of the D chord. Like all three of those melody notes, the F sharp, the A, and the F sharp, are part of the D chord. First of all, the notes are clearly in a D chord, right?
Right.
But that's going to be a hard stretch for you. But there's another way you can do it, and that is you could play the D chord with a partial bar. And then your second finger, and now you can play that melody. So what I would do here is hit the D in the bass, and then strum the rest of the chord, and just move that melody note from F sharp to A and back to F sharp.
Oh. Okay. So like. That's a.
Yeah.
That's a. And then just walk it up.
Hang on a second. So try that one more time. Try not to let go of your second finger. Try to keep that whole chord intact while you make that stretch and come back. And
Okay.
I think good hand position. I mean, if you should be able to find a position your hand can do this without it being too painful.
Okay.
Pretty good. Yeah. Okay. Now, good. Now, what's the next melody? Now, can you hear that we need a different chord when we go to the next melody note?
Right.
Bum, bum. So what is the next melody note?
The next melody note is G.
Right. And assuming that we're in the key of D, the first thing we'd want to do is look at the chords in the key of D that have a G in them.
There's a G.
So
Right.
what are some possibilities?
Some possibilities. Okay, so one would be E minor.
Hmm. And when you strum that, have that high G on so we can hear the note with the chord and see what it sounds like. You might need to switch your fingers. You might need. Wait, I think you've got a D on. I don't think, yeah, and then put the high G on.
Oh, here.
Yeah, and then strum that whole thing. Like yeah, yeah, like even all six strings. Like let's hear.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay. So that's a possibility. And
yeah.
before we look at other possibilities, what's the next melody note?
G sharp.
Right. So we've got a problem here. The melody becomes chromatic. It goes from G to G sharp and then to A. Right. So we've got a
Right.
little chromatic climb there. So we're going to need a different chord for the G sharp because it's certainly not going to be. We're not going to hang on to an E minor chord and go to
Right.
G sharp. Right.
Right.
So what? So the first thing, the first clue that we need to draw from that is that there might be some unusual chords going on here because of
Right.
chords outside the key.
Right.
And the conclusion you just kind of came to there is that, well, E major has G sharp in it, you
Yeah.
know? And so that would be, now this is going to be even more of a stretch because I'm pretty sure you're not going to be able to play that chord and reach that G sharp.
No.
Right. But pretty close though. But what we would usually do in a case like this is your third finger doesn't need. Yes, you can bail on your third finger and just let that string be dead, like the fourth string open. Because chances are you're killing it anyway with your second finger, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah. Now how does that sound? Does that sound like it could be what's in our song?
Yeah, that could be it.
And what's the next melody note?
A.
And what might be a chord that we put there then?
Well, the E or the A that we had before.
Right, so put on that A chord now. The A and do that with one finger. Do that with a bar so that you can reach that high A. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah.
That's where it's going. That's how it's getting us to this A chord.
Yeah.
And we need a couple of chords. We just have to settle on the chords that happen for the G natural and the G sharp. So
Right.
we're gonna have the D played for the first three melody notes. F sharp, A, F sharp is all happening on a D chord. Then we need a chord with a G in it. Then we need a chord with a G sharp in it.
Right.
And the G sharp and we know that when it gets to A, it's on an A chord.
Right.
Okay, or we're buying that already, right? That makes the E with the G sharp on the top very likely because what's the relationship between E and A?
Oh well, they're both major in the well, they're on the yeah. That's 4 and 5 of D.
No.
No.
E and A are not
Oh,
consecutive.
E and A. Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, right. Okay.
I'm hearing that wrong. Okay, I
Okay.
got
All right.
you. Okay, E. The E and A. So the relationship between E and A. You were talking about scale wise,
Yeah, like
right?
could those two chords be in the same key?
No.
Why not?
Uh, um, no, wait a minute. I'll take that back.
Good. Okay, let's reconsider that.
They could. They
Yeah.
could. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. E. If E was 1, A is 4.
Good. And any two chords that have that relationship have another relationship. What else could they be?
They could also be 5 and 1.
In what key?
and an A.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah,
any two chords that are a fourth apart,
yeah,
if they can be 1 and 4, they can be 5 and 1. It's
right.
a kind of
Okay,
it's
yeah,
symbiotic relation. Okay, there's no way out of that. The math is,
yeah,
so so for example, if you have two chords that are like a whole step apart,
yeah.
they can only happen in what spots in a key?
A whole step apart,
Yeah.
5 and 6, or 4 and 5.
4 and 5, right? So
Right,
if you're playing a song that's got C and D in it, the only key that can happen in is G, which would have those as 4 and 5.
right,
But if you were talking about D and G, those are chords that are a fourth apart or a fifth apart, just depending on which one you start on.
right.
So
Okay,
so D is in the key of G and G is in the key of D.
yeah,
And in each of those keys, there's a different third part of the major set of chords. So like in G, if we're in G, D is 5.
yeah.
And that means the third part of the team is C.
C, right,
But if we're in G is 4, and that means the third part of the team is 5, which would be A.
yeah,
Right? Okay. So anyway, so it's always good to notice, when you have a couple of chords figured out what their relationship is, and if they're not next to each other, they're 1 and 4 or 1 and 5. They're 1 and 4 and 1 and 5
right,
until you pin down like what the third chord is, or
right.
or something, right?
Yep,
Um, if you have sometimes you might run into two chords that don't fit that relationship. Like you might have an A and a C.
okay,
That distance can't happen in a major key. That was two major chords a step and a half apart.
right,
So that means somebody is bending or breaking or doesn't know the rules.
right, right.
Okay. Chances are they're bending them, you know.
Yeah,
Um, but because that happens all the time. Matter of fact, one of the most famous opening to a song in history is a C chord and an A chord. And finally lands on a D chord. So, um, you know, not to say that John Fogerty didn't know what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he knew that this is wrong, but it's going to be so cool, you know.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and later on he was explaining that. I may have told you this story one time too before, but what he had in mind was da 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 dum,
Oh, yeah, Beethoven. Yeah,
right? And that's because the rhythm is that, and that distance is that, you know.
yeah, yeah. Huh.
Anyway, okay. Yeah, but such a distinctive sound because those chords don't go together. Well, you hear
Yeah,
them 3 times in a row, and now they go together.
yeah,
Well, that's just how it goes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So okay, so we have one more big bridge to cross here. Um, how does this sound? Now, what I just did there was I played the melody
Yeah,
and went to E minor for the G, and then E major or E7. Oh, since we're hearing E as chord 5 of A and it's taking us to A,
yeah.
that would mean it even could be E7 because it would be the dominant chord, it would be chord 5 in the key of A, so it would be totally reasonable here to let the D string be open and come out. And like, see, you maybe couldn't tell, but when I played this, my D was coming out, and it didn't sound like that was wrong, because it pulls me to the A just perfectly the way a dominant 7 does,
Okay.
right? Okay, but now how did the E minor sound? Let's consider other possibilities.
It sounded okay, but yeah,
Right. Okay. So the melody, it fits the melody note.
yeah. Fits the note. Fits the yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And so what part? Now we're going to look for other chords that have G in it.
Right.
Okay? And now we're actually not sure what key we're in because this thing started on D,
Right.
and but then came home to A, and I've already kind of told you that A is where the vocal starts. This song is actually in the key of A. And
Okay.
that opening theme just happens to start on D, which is chord 4 in A.
Right.
So, it's another thing of him not knowing the rules. Anyway,
Right.
um, but now, and so we tried E minor, which
Right.
had G as what part of the chord?
Um, it's the third.
Yeah. And so, as we've talked about a little bit over recent lessons, when we're trying to harmonize a note, we want to look at the possible chords that have it, and the place to start is the three different parts of a triad: the
Right.
root, the third, and the fifth. You
Right.
know, so E minor, and when I think we got this far a while ago with something. I mean, with some song, and that is, so G is the third of an E minor chord,
Right.
but it could also be the third of a different major chord. See, G is a minor third from E,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, what chord would have G? What major chord would have G as the third? This is kind of tricky.
Yeah. Major chord would have G as the third. Um, C.
Um, right answer to the wrong question. What part of a C chord is G? Oh, wait. Okay, you're right. So, what you did was you came up there with a major chord that has G in it, but G
Right.
is not the third of that chord.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I see.
Hang on, we'll come back to that though, because
Okay.
that's
Okay.
that,
Okay.
that's that's going to be the next part of this question. Is, well, what's a chord that has G in it as a third, as a fifth, and what chord? This is going to be should be really obvious. What's going to have G in it as the root?
G.
Okay, good.
Okay. Okay. So G is the root. Yeah. That part's easy. Okay.
Yeah, so maybe that's how our melody goes. Maybe, yeah. So let's see how that sounds. Now that sounds better than the E minor,
Yeah. It does.
because we need a little more drastic, or a little more normal change. Like, it's very, very unusual to go from a minor chord to the same major chord. You know,
Yeah.
and in this case, that G sounded a whole lot better.
And it has that high G in there that we were
Right, right.
looking for. Yeah.
But now you also came up with a C chord that has it as the fifth,
Yeah.
and that chord wouldn't even be in either of these keys, because if we're in the key of D, now that doesn't mean we're not going to try it. That because if we were in the key of D, which I already told you we're not, but even in the key of D, we've got C sharps, because C sharp would be the seventh note of the scale.
Right.
And if we were in the key of A, we have even more. We got C sharp in the key of A too, because A has more sharps than D.
Right.
So C seems like a long shot, like an outlier here. G seems more normal because at least it's in the key of D, even though, I've already told you we're not in the key of D, but that's closer to the key of A.
Right.
Anything that has a C chord in it. But now try that, play that melody a little one time, and then go to the G chord and just listen to it when you do it rather than me doing it. So do what I did here. Play that D with the little melody, and then go to the G chord with the high G in it.
Okay. 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 Yeah. Good. No, I've
You did what we were talking about, but what are you
yeah.
what are you what are you whining about now?
It just that just didn't sound right.
Okay, hang on. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's consider the outlying possibility,
Okay.
which we said was having the high G as the fifth of the chord, which took us to what possibility?
Right. C.
Okay, now try that same thing. Now on that C chord, what you'd have to do is play the high G with it so we can hear the note in the chord. So you go to the C chord. Okay, so try that.
Okay. So we start here. Okay. So we'd have to play this. Uh, yeah.
And then our E7 chord with the high G sharp.
Um,
Yeah, get your third finger out of there to make it E7.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And we need G sharp on the top. You got to stretch.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a doozy. Okay. I'll have to do some hand exercises. Okay.
Yeah. And then to the A chord with the high A.
Yeah.
With the high A on it, though.
With the high A.
So how do we do that? Oh, where's that A?
Oh, that A's way up there.
Right,
Oh,
so
that's right.
yeah.
We're doing this. Yeah.
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 Okay. Now you can feel that there's going to be a little bit of a wrestling match going on to play this, but listen to it. That's how it goes.
Okay.
And really interesting too. Another really interesting sideline. Oh, then I got another sideline story I got to tell you. We hear this melody ascending chromatically. G, G sharp, A. And we started with D in the bass, and the bass then goes down to C.
Yeah.
And then continues down to B and to A. So we actually hear this. What's called contrary motion in music, where you've got these two melodies going in opposite directions. And both of them start on, or the first note we hear in there is a pair of notes not in the key. We've got the G natural that's not in the key of A, and the C natural in the bass. So he's really taken some chromatic liberties here in this. And so if you hear just the bass and the melody and no other chords in there, we have this. The bass working its way down to A. And so even when I strum it, when I get to the E chord, I don't want to hear this low E down there. I want to hear the B in the bass. Can you hear that? Does it come through clear enough? You know.
Yep.
So that's the intro to this. That is, just amazing. That because it's so it's just so wrong.
It's so wrong that it's right. Is there a musical name for that divergence of?
Yes, and that happens. That's really common in classical stuff, and they just call it contrary motion. With
Oh, it is that's the word.
yeah, so I used that term earlier. Yeah,
Yeah.
they just say, hey, the voices are moving in contrary motion, as opposed to parallel motion, which would be something like this. They're both climbing, and in that case, they're climbing in thirds.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the thirds are major, some of them are minor, just depending on where they fall in the scale. But like in the bass, I played G, A, B, C. And in the melody, I started on the third of G, which was a B. And so the high part went B, C, D, E. They just went up the scale together in thirds, G and B, A and C, B in the bass and D on the top. And then it gets to the C chord with the E on the top. So all the higher notes were just a third above the low notes.
Okay.
And so then we're talking about parallel motion as opposed to contrary motion. Another classic example of contrary is the very opening to Bach's Bourrée. Right there, the bass goes, and the melody goes. So and the notes are actually crossing. In the beginning, it's a G and an E, then two F sharps, then the high F sharp goes up to G, and the low F sharp goes down to E. So the pair of notes in the middle was an octave,
Okay.
and then anyway. So yeah, it's a real common technique and tool in classical stuff.
Okay.
So
Okay.
um,
Um, okay. So that's the intro.
yeah.
The the hand stretch um, here. I can work through that. Now,
It's definitely worth working on because yeah, that's a really
yeah,
useful stretch, and you can see it's not getting it's getting a little more comfortable. It's just kind of getting used to
yeah,
yeah. So don't
yeah.
feel like it's like oh my old hands are not going to be able to do this. They will.
Right. Yeah. The it looks like the A up here. Uh, well, obviously there's a lot of similarities to that to the D shape.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great. And then the E stretch here. Yeah, it's always a challenge.
I think let me think about that. Where you want your elbow for that?
You're really square underneath it. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm way down low here, you know,
Yeah.
and the elbow way in, elbow right up against my ribs when I'm doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that moving in there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll
You
get
know,
that.
to divert for just a second, I'm not sure if you knew that Muriel Anderson every Monday at 4 o'clock does a show from her either wherever she happens to be in the country, either at her house or something like that, and she has
Okay.
different guests on all the time, and like I don't know, many months ago, and this especially started with the whole COVID thing, and one time I was her guest and we kind of goofed around for 40 minutes or so and talked about different things, and last week or 3 days ago, her guest was Mason Williams of classical gas fame. And for this one, I tuned in. I have. There were a couple times if she's had somebody I'm particularly interested in, it's like I wanted
Yeah.
to see what was going on. And I knew Mason. I'd had a few exchanges, email and phone calls with Mason over the years because of various things were going on. And I was really excited to hear, to see what she was going to be doing with him. And and I knew he was probably not going to play. I'd invited him to to do a concert with me about 15 years ago, and he really said he was not playing too much, and he certainly couldn't get in shape to do like a 45-minute set or anything like that. And so she and he's 84 years old now. So when I was asking him about this, he was probably more like 70. I mean, it was probably like 15 years ago. I was asking him about doing a show. Anyway, but the reason this story is kind of you'll find interesting is that she people were asking him all kinds of questions online, little text things as she's talking to him and stuff. And she had arranged classical gas for her harp guitar, where she's got a whole bunch of extra bass notes and then a whole bunch of high notes up here. And it was pretty fascinating hearing her version of classical gas. Although then Mason, at the end, made a little sexist comment that I thought, oh man, that I guess that would have been okay 20 years ago. He basically said something and said, it's like it's really hard to listen to and just not keep looking at you when you're playing the guitar. It's like, oh shoot, oh, cringe, a little bit of cringe. But okay, the reason I bring this story up is she did ask him about or people are always saying, hey, could he play something? And he said, I really can't play right now. I have Dupuytren's contract. I've got
Oh, really?
hand problems.
Oh,
Yeah, and he said that he did like a while ago go in and get like a cortisone shot in his hand, and he said, I do not recommend this. It was so painful, But they did say that in about 4 or 5 days or maybe a week, I would probably be able to play a little bit. And he
oh,
said, and that was the case. In a week or two, he was able to play again. But they also said, it's going to come back. This is temporary. This shot is only going to do so much, you know.
yeah.
And, so.
I can see it. Well, there's actually there's a treatment. I mean, there are three ways you can attack this.
That's what I thought. And I knew you knew
Three
about this.
ways. One is this thing, needle epidurotomy. They go in there and just basically poke holes in this sheet, sheath basically growing on top of the tendon is what's
Yeah.
happening, and
Yeah.
that's what's bringing it in. So they poke holes in that, which basically, um, and then they break it open. They
Yeah.
break the tendon. Okay, I've had that done 3 times, and he told me I'm at the end of it. That's painful, but not. It's nothing like getting an actual shot in your hand, getting a cortisone shot in your hand.
Yeah.
Uh, and the other thing is there's this then there's surgery where they actually go in and take all the stuff out, and then there's this stuff called Xiaflex, which is an actual drug of some sort that they stick in there, and it dissolves it.
Oh,
And so that's again, it's temporary, but it's not surgery. But unfortunately, once you get to my stage, I'm a 3-time loser in this, and so once you get to my stage, I probably can't do Xiaflex, and he said I probably can't do another needle aponeurotomy. So that means you have to cut it open. So if that happened, if that's the, and I'm getting to the point where this is in the way enough, because what happens is all the other stuff you're doing, when you try to your right hand, this gets in the way,
yeah.
and you're trying to grab something or put and you're trying to wash your face and your fingers in your way. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really wild, but that's happened. But I would probably I have a problem on the other side. So that's how big that hand is. Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Oh
how
man.
big
Yeah.
that hand is. So
Yeah.
it's dramatically different, and that reason is, you got all this space here is because there's either Dupuytren's in here or something else that they
Wow.
yeah. So it's messy.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
messy. I don't know. Yeah, it's one of these things where, unlike fixing the things that are gonna kill you, like cancer or anything
Yeah.
like that, or your heart problem. You gotta go do that.
Right.
This falls into the when is the least inconvenient time to do
Right.
it.
Right.
Do I want to do it after golf season? Well, if I do it after golf season, let's see, that's right before,
Yeah.
and so consequently, you just keep putting it off, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know how long I put it off, but
So let's talk a little bit about the chord progression now, and you probably let's listen to this for a second. I'm playing that high A chord. I've got the A up on the top
yeah,
right,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to play through the first couple of chords. I want you to tell me what you hear.
I hear the bass going down,
Okay.
um, and the second thing that you played after that A sounded very
Okay.
minor chord, and as you got to the end of that phrase, which sounded like that was 4 measures, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, 4 measures. Then my my mind heard a bass line descending from that point, tying into the next,
Okay. Which I didn't play yet.
which you didn't play. No,
Right.
but that's what. Yeah,
Right.
it
Okay.
was.
So what you're about to hear is this. Okay. So that's coming up. Um, listen again to the beginning.
Okay.
The first 3 chords in particular. Listen again real carefully to the bass.
It's actually not descending. The
Not
bass,
the bass.
yeah, the bass is not descending. It's the same.
What is? But why did you think there was something descending? You were
Because
right. But what was it?
the chords themselves.
Yeah. So play that A chord with the high A in it. And now listen to my next chord. Here's that chord 1 string at a time. This is gonna make it too easy. All right. Here's my first chord.
Yep.
Here's my second chord.
Okay,
Wait,
so
it changed.
we go from, so we're going down.
Okay.
I'm still hearing
Right. It's still
that
that bass note doesn't change.
the bass note doesn't change, and so if it's an A bass note and I'm going down, um, should be
Find the melody note. Find the note that you think changed.
okay. Right there, E sharp. Okay, okay.
So what chord? So that it's still just that A chord with that note in it. What chord is that?
That would be A7.
Not quite.
A,
Yeah.
and this is A,
Right.
and that's the G sharp.
Right.
And this must be the next one. Yeah.
Yeah. Now what chord is that? Either one of them. If you could pin down either one, I'll take it. I'll take either answer.
Okay. Okay.
Because what note does that chord have in it? What's the new note in the third chord?
In the third chord here, that's a G,
So one of these had G sharp and one of them had G.
right?
What's the story there?
One of them's not in the key,
Okay.
right? Um, I'm
Okay.
flogging here.
How do you normally play A7?
Like that.
So what note is in there that makes it 7?
G.
And if you had G sharp there instead on that string, what is that?
That is major 7.
This is just A to A major 7 to A7 with the voicing the 7th up on the top instead of in the middle, like right there.
Aha. Okay. Stop, you're both right. Yeah, I get it. Okay.
Now, which of those chords, the A major 7 or the A7, is in the key of A?
Is in the key of what?
A.
A major 7.
Right. So when you go to A7, what is probably going to happen next?
Uh, okay, so A7, then I'm gonna go to 5.
Kind of. When a chord is a 7th,
Then I'm gonna go to 1.
yes, which would be what?
Yeah.
1 with respect to this being 5. In other words, this A7
Is the 5.
acting as 5, and what's it 5 of?
It is 5 of just 2 back from there. So F. No.
We're on 5 and we're looking for 1. So it's not just 2 back.
It's yeah. No, okay. I was
Forward.
yeah. I was going forward instead of backwards. Um, and so 5. Oh, C.
Still not quite. We could also go forward if A is 5.
D. 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 D.
So follow that with a D chord and see what you think.
Okay. Would you just do it this way?
You could. Just make sure to shorten that bar so that we hear the D in the bass.
Huh?
Make sure to shorten the bar so we hear
Oh
the D
yeah, yeah.
in the bass.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the first four chords in this progression. A to A major 7 to A7 to D. And now is where we hear the bass descend from D, oops, to C sharp and to B. And the next chord is going to be some kind of B chord. But that's what's happening there. So at this point, you could either like take it from there and try to figure out what else happens. There are still some unusual things in this song, or you could take a look at my lesson and just start working on playing the chord progression. So it does use a couple of other chords, not in the key. I'll give you a couple of hints here too.
Okay.
There is one other chord not in the key, another secondary dominant, kind of like the A7 was.
Mm-hmm.
And this descent that we hear, this chromatic descent that goes from the root of the chord, meaning we're just playing a major, or it could be a minor chord, but in this case it's major, drops down a half step to basically a sharp 7, then another half step to shouldn't call it a sharp 7, but the natural 7 that makes it major 7. Then another half step to make it a dominant 7 chord. So this has now got a chord with a flatted 7th in it.
Mm-hmm.
And generally that lowered 7th in a progression like this has to continue this chromatic descent, and this G has to go to this F sharp that's part of the D chord. So we hear a whole 4-note da 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 da. That same thing is going to happen later on, coming up, on a minor chord that is the normal or the relative minor of the key we're in, which would be chord 6. Remember chord 6, the minor chord on 6 is the name of the relative minor key. So if we see a key signature of 3 sharps, which are F, C, and G, if the major key that has that is A, and the minor key that has that is the 6th step of our A scale, which is what?
B minor.
No, that's only 2. We're in A. If you were thinking in D it's B minor. But
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's F sharp.
F sharp. So what happens coming up in this song, there's an F sharp minor and this chromatic descent from the root, but this time it happens in the middle. Like I've got the low root here on the F sharp. There's an octave up here.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to happen. I went a half step lower here. And it's got to continue another half step. The next chord has to have this note in it.
Okay.
Has to have D sharp in it. So that's what we're going to hear there is F sharp minor with a natural 7th, which in this case would be a sharp note, E sharp, then down another half step, and then down another half step to a chord that has this D sharp in it, and then down another half step to D to set up this is just an amazing chord progression.
Yeah.
And that's only half the song. Because then later on it lands on F sharp minor, we hear this. And it goes into the key of F sharp major, whereas F sharp minor is the relative minor key, and he just changes gears completely and lands on F sharp major and now has a section there. You're asking me, will my love grow? I don't know. Stick around down in the show. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. When he comes back to A, and then has that great lead. something like that.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful
Yeah.
lead that
Okay.
happens in there.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
okay, enough
Well,
of that.
that's good. Yeah.
That's a good major project for you. Um,
Media project. Yeah.
yeah. If one quick hint on While My Guitar Gently Weeps is there are only three minor keys that are reasonable to play in on the guitar: A minor, E minor, and D minor. But any of those can, because those are the only minor chords we can play as open chords. Everything else has to be bars. Every other minor chord.
Hmm.
And so, with While My Guitar Gently Weeps, he originally did it in one of those keys, but capoed up the neck, so it sounds really different than what it sounds like down here. And I'll give you one big hint on it for your ears. But if you want to just look at the lesson, you can too.
Yeah.
He did it starting with a D minor shape,
Okay.
but not here. And so he had the same kind of descending bass line, like D minor, C in the bass. The bass kind of went down, you know. So you know the progression in A minor, and you know you could probably just transpose it to D minor,
Yeah.
and then you'd have to find the pitch by listening to him and see where on the neck he is. But his
Okay.
hand shape is doing this in D minor.
Okay.
Okay. So if you get that far, that'd be another good little side project.
Chord shape. Yeah. D minor shapes.
D
Okay.
minor capoed someplace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Okay.
then just listen to that anthology version to find the pitch.
Yeah. Yeah, because the chord progression, if you just transpose it into D minor, you'll have all the right chords from
Yeah.
the
Oh,
way you
cool.
know it in A
Right.
and A minor,
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
but it
All
makes
right.
a different voicing on the guitar. It makes the guitar, it makes the chords all sound different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Well, that's a couple fun Beatles things. So,
yeah.
okay.